Robert Greene's book, Mastery. What follows is a summary of my insights into just the introductory chapter, the introduction to the book. And it's actually going to cover quite a bit. We've got the scope of the book, we'll talk about that, mankind's ultimate power, the path to mastery, and roadblocks to mastery, as well as outcomes that are promised if you follow the wisdom contained in this book. If I had to summarize my understanding of what this book is about and what it's going to be so far, I would say that mankind's ultimate power is their ability to achieve mastery due to their unique minds. And not just any mastery of any skill, but in that each one of us is genetically unique. So too is what we have the potential to master at the highest levels. So Robert Greene defines mastery as the feeling that we have a greater command of reality, other people, and ourselves. So it's interesting that it's defined as a feeling. However, this book is not so much about feelings and such things, but is a practical guide to the attainment of mastery. Robert Greene has really set out to lay the path for you to walk, and he's been very encouraging that it should be walked. And also he talks about why it often isn't walked. One of the things is he talks about the passivity mindset, a mindset of being passive, in that one sets their expectations and requirements for success so low subconsciously that it's very easy to achieve, and that makes life feel less dangerous. So if your expectation for yourself is that you are going to change the field of biophysics, that's a different expectation than I'm going to go to work and get home and that's it. That's my expectation for myself. Even smaller things like a sense of accomplishment for finishing watching a television show. In a subtle sense, you've accomplished that. You finished it. So he suggests overcoming this mindset in order to, have the momentum and the motivation to achieve levels of mastery which take work. He says to see mastery, it's twofold how to overcome the passivity mindset. One is to see mastery as extremely necessary and positive because it represents our capabilities in life, what we have to contribute to the world, not just in a local way, but potentially towards the advancement of the entire human race. And the second way to overcome the passivity mindset is to remember that our brains, the quality of our brains, are determined by our actions. That is to say that what we do and how we behave and what choices we make affect the way our brain grows and develops, or it doesn't. And actually learning new things creates an effect called neurogenesis. Basically, new neurons are going to grow. So what is mankind's ultimate power? I already said it's mastery. And he says that the evolution of mastery basically came from two primary evolutionary advantages. One was the visual, The other was a social. So visual is interesting because he mirrors the way that our sight works to the way that our minds work, which I think is very interesting. The eyes positioned on the front of the head allow both distanced, unfocused, but able to see a pretty wide area versus focusing both eyes on one subject and being able to study it in detail at the expense of almost not noticing other things around it. You know how you're when you're focused on one thing, the things around you you're not able to pay attention to them as much with your vision. So he's saying that the mind works in the same way, and that we're able to take a broad, detached, far view of things, of systems, of people, of anything, even of ourselves. And then we're also able to take a laser focused view and look at something in high detail. And this bipolarity of capability of thought creates a mind that's able to improve upon its skills and understandings. The other evolutionary advantage was a social one, in that something called mirror neurons, phenomenon of and observed in primates, or at least some primates and humans, is once a human or a primate witnesses another primate using or doing a new activity, or doing an activity. I don't even think it has to be a new one. The neurons in the person viewing the other one's brain fires just like as if they had been doing the activity as well, almost identically. And so what that allows the brain to do is to learn through observation almost as effectively as through practice. And that allows skills to be spread throughout a society much more quickly. If one person learns something, the other people can observe it and then practice it on their own, learn it, improve upon it. The others will observe that improvement, learn it, and so on and so forth. And this also leads to this phenomenon he calls thinking inside, meaning the ability to imagine oneself in like a different form. So there are two expressions of this, organic and inorganic, he says. Organic is to imagine yourself in another organic form, to imagine what it must be like to be that other person, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, or an animal or a bug, to think, how does it feel to be an ant? How does it feel to be, a zebra that you're hunting? So that's an advantage. And then the inorganic is to imagine what it feels like to, the same thing but in inorganic objects. And one example he gives is a practical understanding is like a tool being an extension of one's own hand. When you hold it, thinking about what, like having a connection of feeling where the end of that is, and imagining like how hard you need to hit, and that kind of stuff, like the properties of that object, kind of having a sense of thinking from that perspective. He also talks about intuition, which is an interesting thing to bring up because it's less easily defined or put in a box. But what he, Robert Greene that is, defines intuition as nothing, quote, nothing more than a sudden and immediate seizing of what is real without the need for words or formulas. So I think of this as like before thought, precognitive understanding, or maybe beyond thought, metacognitive understanding. So the idea that it's an understanding and a grasping of what he says is something real, the reality of something, the core essence of what it is, without opinions or words to define. Because when you use words or language, you're limited to what those words and the connotations of those words in order to describe the thing. But the thing exists beyond the existence of those words. So an intuitive grasp of it is to understand the thing that exists before it is named, perhaps. I called it a quasi-Taoist notion in my blog post. summary of the introduction because I thought it reminded me of the first verse of the Tao Te Ching. So, the path to mastery, he outlines this pretty clearly. And it starts with an inclination. So, at youth, you probably had a particular inclination to be interested in some things or another. And being drawn to those things is almost like a natural expression of who you are. From what he said before, I might think that it's a genetic express, like your DNA, your genetics, your makeup have a particular expression that would be most optimal. And so you're drawn to things that will bring that potential out. But often we're led to a different path because all these potentials are all going to be as unique as we are as individuals physically. So it's going to, it might not be something conventional that you can put your finger on. It might not have to do with your career, but he says that usually it's going to have to do with your vocation instead of career. He uses the word vocation, which is to say something that's deeper to your being rather than something to pay the bills. Next, after you have the inclination, the next part to the path of mastery is to encounter the thing that you are inclined towards. So if you're inclined towards the study of snow, but you live and grow up in the desert and you never learn about snow or see it, then you'll never be able to become a master in that domain. So you have to encounter the thing with which you have an inclination. Next is apprenticeship, and this is where you apprentice under someone who's already done something similar in the field you're interested in, and you're kind of like on the outskirts of the field learning about it, looking in. After you've gone through the apprenticeship phase, he calls it the creative active phase. This is when you're inside of the machinery, seeing inside the machinery, I think is how he put it. And you're really practicing by doing. Your immersion, experimentation, creative play, because you have a grasp of the subject or the skill, and now you're learning about it and making it your own, internalizing it, if you will. Finally, the last level is mastery, where you're able to see the whole picture with clarity and access like the heart and the life, the reality of the thing, perhaps the same thing that the intuition can grasp, what is real, or the intuition can seize, as it was put. We've already talked about the roadblocks to mastery, so the final thing to mention are the outcomes. There's a large list of outcomes, and I will just read you the bullet list that I have in the blog. Some of these are direct quotes, some of them aren't, or summaries, but what is this book going to do for you? Guide you through the transformative process of mastery, discover your life's task, vocation, how to fulfill your life's task on various levels, learn how to find the perfect mentor, how to take full advantage of your apprenticeship, cultivating social intelligence, when to leave the apprenticeship and start the creative or active creative phase, reveal timeless strategies for creative problem solving, accessing deeper, profound levels of intelligence, understand the powers gained through mastery, and this one is a quote, initiate you into a philosophy that will make it easier to follow this path. There are many historical masters and contemporary masters studied and interviewed. If you're interested in seeing the full list, you can go to internalizemastery.com and check out the article on this in the blog section. But I think it's nice to end with this quote in which Robert Greene kind of shares his philosophy of the underlying heart of this book. He says that, quote, over the centuries, people have placed a wall around such mastery, but the wall is imaginary.